Yeah, we're starting with the hang loose today. The graphic is here for Book of Nahx Volume 4, right? We're still kind of muddling down the topics of exploring Bon, right? A good natured Bon ENFANT. But, welcome to the channel, right? We are attempting to kind of like, it's early season, right? Or we're going to call it pre-season, kind of getting used to going live here on the channel because there's really just no traffic. So after yesterday's test, we basically found out that YouTube is still flagging. So even if, no matter how much narration or how the content gets edited, it's still going to flag automatically for anything video, audio match on YouTube. And so, the question is kind of like surfaced in a lot of different categories. So I've been like kind of using ChatGPT to help me kind of like organize my thoughts. There hasn't always been somebody opposite me that's kind of like organizing necessarily a train of thought. What I usually had to do is operate from a very much more interesting thing. And so we're going to get into that. But before we do, let's go ahead and just like kick it off in the normal way and get this party started. So again, this is Advantage of Adversary, Volume 4, Book of Nahx. And although Nahx Studios is essentially like the base platform that I'm operating from, and I might actually need to like turn down the track itself, because there's just like so much feedback I found from when I did this the other day with the headphones and everything else. But getting this all essentially teamed up and ready isn't necessarily yet the easiest little thing to do. So I'm going to kick this over into my earphones as opposed to as it currently is. We'll turn up down the desktop audio just a tad. So hopefully, like yesterday, I noticed on the return that I was I don't know, I guess more or less the volume was too loud. But anyway, this is like why it's early and we're trying to figure out all the levels and so forth for presentation. What I was saying is with ChatGPT, it's kind of like been a sounding board for me. But really, over the course of a lot of time before I was ever using anything of that nature, a lot of times like the best indicators for whether I'm on track with something versus not is it's indicative of something completely different. So what's kind of baffling me today, everybody's making much of Dolly Parton passing away, and I get that because she is like an icon in the space, But that's kind of the nature of what it's ultimately just kind of like this reactivity that we have to things of that nature when really we have somebody who's, if you really, I guess, I don't know the details, I haven't dived into it, but let's just say apparently she's 80 years old. Apparently she's had cancer for a while. And so, splash, only on the death does it make headlines. It's like if we just like right now went through all the celebrities in their 70s, 80s, 90s who have cancer, like to anticipate, and maybe it wouldn't land as heavy. And I'm not trying to say like that's the point. It's to like not have as an intense of a like call to action as it is, but I've been exploring a little bit more of thoughts about communication versus contemplation, and how our communication age that we're kind of like in the midst of, where everybody in their dog has like an excuse to make content right now, versus like actually thinking about things prior to, especially when it revolves around something like tragedy. And so anyways, we kind of like delve into this, and then I kind of get over here to share the screen. The thing that's most peculiar to me, which is completely off the whole like media string of what's been going on, is the fact that the other day I was editing up some content. I didn't save it, mind you, but in that Eddie Mora sit down, right? He's let's see if I can even pull it up. In the Eddie Mora sit down that we were talking about the other day, I basically did this recording because my initial thought, or my side thought, I'm going to come over here to screen share now, is, actually let's get rid of me so I'm not in the way. It's right here, right? So there's this clip where he says, creativity problems. Oh, I guess I can help you with that just this one time. And no. So when I hear no, or just that utterance of nah, like Nahx, it has an effect on me at this point because I've heard it so many different times. So it's right here that I clipped in, and I was looking for another piece of content. And so what that piece of content was that I recorded, let's come over here and kind of dive into what my horrible organization, project, videos, commentary. It was this. So this is essentially a recording, just like a screen capture, right? So what I generally do in order to grab my content, and it's pretty easy these days with some base software, screen record whatever you're doing on your TV, is this. So it's a Glenn Beck introduction. So this is Glenn Beck right here, right? And then he's just like, this is a history introduction of like how long Glenn Beck's been in the radio space and all these other things. But I'm not going to play it out loud. I should probably just mute it. But basically, as it gets through, it's like, na 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 na, and then it's like there's a na na na, and so it always captures my attention. And he's not the only one, So a lot of times, what's been able to kind of grab my attention in the media space is people utilizing my name brand, or like they'll do little subtle things and knock on wood, and or just in the midst of the commentary, the attention grabs exist. And this, why is this even anything pertinent? It's because I wake up. I didn't actually edit it into or like fully go into anything, but if you were to type in Glenn Beck today, his next thing is that tomorrow he's set to have President Trump exclusive coming on to the stream. So, I didn't listen to him necessarily this morning. He's not necessarily become a daily listen, but there have been many, many instances inside the media space where similarly to this, I get that indication of kind of like what it is as far as the meal, right? The bon appetit, right? We'll bring this over. So the meal itself, I can kind of like make a call, say hello, wave, like this is an indication when we're talking about the Internet of Things and communicating. And then when you look for the recoil or the echo, right, down the line, and then what you have is a delivery and something. So tomorrow might be really interesting as far as that kind of feedback. And it's a process that is very different from what like we're using now today in, let's say, I'll jump back over here to share the screen, sharing the screen. You can kind of see how many different communications I have, but most of them are under Book of Nahx and YouTube. So I'm like have my thumbnail creation, my video scripting, and then Kiwi Walks. Under Book of Nahx is a whole different thing where like I'm kind of like going through a lot of thoughts and context as far as like organization for the book, the books, the written books. Okay, if you don't remember, plug volume 1 is available. Go to 7 Chakra Tears, or even just find me on Facebook, my person, and you'll be able to download the ebook. So what I was exploring yesterday, kind of in this latter part of the conversation, was more about just kind of like there was an event that happened here locally, and what that ended up kind of looking like was, a whole bunch of people. The way I first saw it, right, was a thread created by some, sidebar news outlet, for content, for clicks, and just to kind of like update the community about things that are happening, urgent matters in the community. And it came to find out that somebody had, there was somebody dead inside of a car at a FedEx facility. And essentially, like, as you go down the thread, there's just a whole bunch of projection and thoughts and oh my goshes, and the list goes on until this like one, and it's like very different as far as the feel, right? The vibe around this one was like somebody who's immediate to the actual circumstance, someone who, as an actual employee who worked at the facility, who knew what was actually already going down the line. And it's interesting because I've been in that, I think we've all essentially been in that in some way, shape, or form these days, where you find out information and you're just subject to all these other iterations of what everybody else has to do. Even when I had Chloe, my dog, who's in the background making noise, actually that's Aurora, but Chloe opened her Quick, and so I posted a quick picture where her Quick was exposed on her under the paw, and there was like a little glisten. And even within a couple things, when you post it to social media, no matter what, it looks like there's metal in her paw. Like, there's no freaking metal in her paw. Like, because the one like speculative thing ends up becoming the cyclone of information as opposed to the raw and real. And so that's why I was kind of exploring this, is like when I'm observing social media and content, a lot of the time it's just so speculative, it's so immediate that there's not even this opportunity anymore to be contemplative, however you want to think about that, like to actually meditate on how is this going to impact other people, or am I just doing this instantaneously based on our own impulse and reactivity to the world. And this is a paradigm of just absolute ridiculousness where we're actually at today. If we really look at the full scope of societal norms, like that's the immediacy compound or complex, right? We think that the second that we hear about something, there needs to be a X amount of information about it, and then we consider everything, valid, I guess, within relative speculation and, with the onset of so much fake. But that fake has been there for so long, and it's just, it's how it's buried and how it's interpreted that is what's needing to shift, I think, for the normal population in order to really kind of bridge the gap between truth and false. Or literally we just need to completely drain the swamp and get rid of, it all. If you're like not speaking candidly and, using all the roundabout methodologies of the past, then like this is the skewed nature of where communication is just offsetting the contemplation of the capacity that we actually have, and we're not entertaining whatsoever. And so it was kind of interesting. I left the conversation at this. I'll jump back over on my chat GPT, where it's just basically like there was a single thought where I especially like that last line you posed, and it was this one. Not a rule, but a question that the Book of Nahx could pose more broadly. Our ability to communicate has outpaced our ability to contemplate. And because we were exploring more of like the history of communication and how it's kind of like ramped up into like the internet age, and now everybody thinks that they're a creator and a worthy one at that, including myself at times. But ultimately, I think what I'm trying to get at is to dive deeper into like this it's less speculative for me, but I can understand why other people are. But I think if we really take into account the indicators that are kind of revealing something more true to us, as opposed to just kind of avoiding all that stuff. Now it goes through this whole thing, what if immediacy isn't always progress? And I like that as a question, like posing it as a question. So what if immediacy isn't like the standard? What if like actually, because I think I asked a question more about like, at what point is social media like going to be held accountable for causing the same types of strife that we've done in the past, right? It's hold somebody accountable for not allowing, hey dogs, stop, go lay down or get out. 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 Sorry for the interruption there. Out, Aurora. Go. Anyway, so there's like a lot in here. I'm not going to kind of go through all of it into, like, I'm not one to operate off of a script base. I can't even like read this on my small screen. I'd have to like really be looking all the way over here to actually be able to read this. But it has this like series, right? So did I understand it? Did I sit with it? Do I even know whether it's true? Am I contributing understanding or merely contributing another reaction to the reaction of to the reaction? Like that's the space and place that we find ourselves in more often than not. Out! Out! I'm going to close this door real quick. Not that they're being absolutely outrageous, but it is kind of a distraction. And so, like, the question is, when and if, like, you do something as, like, random as it is, like, doing an edit is one thing, but just having a random conversation in today's day and age, whether that's that conversation over the phone and then on the tail end of it the very next day, based on your internet strokes or your vocal inflection, whatever permissions you've been granted to these corporations. Now, at what point do we start drawing a line like this is overstep, this is overreach? Because the fact that we haven't done that, we haven't been pushing back toward that essential privacy, and that's a very like basic one. That's not even considering the whole scope of, you know, losing a family member and having it put out right there in the immediate thing. You know, this whole backbone of our of the court system, right? Not guilty until proven guilty in the court of law is completely backwards now because of, you know, content creators and the impulse to do everything immediately as opposed to like really contemplate on, you know, we can't consider every single possibility, and that's like a pretense that I'm very aware of. But there should be at least some sort of standard as far as like a time frame in specific events as far as like the reveal. And it's been brought up very recently in my threads in my media about like 9/11, for example, and, you know, on the very next day the front page is war, and so it's like there's almost like a precedent no matter what in an instance. And who is it that's defining those precedent? Well, usually the editors and presidents, I suppose, of the corporations that lead them. But at this point, it's like such a profit-sharing force that anybody with enough shares has that power, and it's literally like buying your way into the drain, or into the storm drain. And so, at that point, that's kind of what we're getting at with when I started Nahx, Book of Nahx, and started like really pushing content. I started to see that trickling effect, and that's what this looks like. And it's not always just so subtle. It starts subtle in the beginning part of the year, so at this point it's literally like a conversation I can go and listen to tomorrow with Glenn Beck. It moves a little bit beyond the next threshold with, okay, you recognize the call, now we've got our communication going on. Now there's a conversation with somebody you would otherwise never have an opportunity to have a conversation with. And so it's in that listening that like the new stuff and the new level of like what should I be pointing forward and so on and so forth really matters. And I don't think everybody looks at it that way because we're so programmed to just think of everything as a conditional physical space. We no longer only live in this physical space where we're grounded, where I plant my feet. Just because I'm here in this room, my little studio with nobody around, doesn't mean that not everybody in the world basically could have access to me via this webcam that's plugged into the internet, that's plugged into this, that like pretty much by permission standards, like click, 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 click from this corporation, that corporation, whether it's my auto insurance policies, you know, they steal all my data, whether I'm in my car, how fast I'm going, at what speed, where location, maps. I mean, Google and all these corporations have essentially just like placed us all on this little pedestal, which is much more of less like a plateau. And it's when we recognize that sitting on this plateau doesn't necessarily serve us, so we have to start testing some of those boundaries and borders in order to actually kind of level up. and consider things that you might not have ever conceived of before or considered before. And so only in that instance do we really get opportunities to kind of move beyond. So I haven't listened to this yet, and I hope Glenn, well, we'll have to do this as another test. It's early on in this channel, so we'll go ahead and jump right over, but this is whatever he has for
just
his content. I'm actually going to jump over to my other YouTube channel because I don't want the advertisements. It's when you pay for it and you have multiple accounts, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but
I guess I'm going all social.
okay, so this is where we'll jump over here to what Glenn Beck's thing was. This is 3 hours ago. I haven't listened to it yet, but we'll jump on here and see what this sounds like.
I guess I'm going all socialist today because I'm going to blow off all of our commercials, except I'm going to be paying for it, so it's not. Well, I guess that is how socialism works. But we have to blow off our commercials here because we have President Donald J. Trump joining us in just a couple of seconds. These are terrifying times right now. There are calls for Sharia law all across the Western world. It feels like there's a foreign occupation that is happening in parts of America. War with Iran. Prices are still biting at the checkout line. Marxists are exploiting this crisis in every way possible.
By the way, if you're listening in the background, you can hear that na 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 na, and so I think this is really. In the past, it's kind of like gotten me my heartbeat going and like kind of like escalated where I go mentally with a lot of different things. You know, because that's what it does as far as the nervous system. When you realize how much access is actually being granted to you as an individual, as a person. But the reality is that it's taken me years in order to kind of like recalibrate and get back down to being grounded in this instance and just being able to like kind of go through it. And this is more of what I mean as far as being contemplative before being communicative. Like I'd rather do this and listen to it in a live setting, so I'm not just feeling like I'm all alone and that this is actually broadcast, than otherwise like the past where I'm just kind of like deer in headlights sitting in the background going, holy cow, like is this really happening right now or am I crazy? So I didn't realize that this exclusive was actually today. For some reason I thought it was yesterday, but nonetheless, like that's the immediacy again of what
Possible. It's easy to forget where we were just 2 years ago. So before we get to the president, let me just recap what has happened this week. Monday, Supreme Court cleared the way for the president's mail-in ballot order to take effect before the midterm 6-3. Homeland Security can build a federal citizenship list and send it to the states, while the Attorney General can prioritize the prosecutions of officials who give ballots to ineligible voters. Also, the State Department. The State Department is moving to revoke the tourist and business visas of up to 200,000 people who came as visitors and then filed for asylum, the largest action in American history. In 14 days this month, in 14 days, ICE arrested almost 1,500 people in Virginia and Maryland alone, including 400 with convictions and pending charges for crimes from sexual battery, kidnapping, robbery, attempted murder, rape, MS-13 members. One of the most successful operations ever. Also, this week, we find out State Department is moving to revoke the tourist and business visas of up to 200,000 people who came as visitors. Let's see. Meanwhile, we find out ICE arrests surged nearly 50,000 in July, highest monthly total. Homeland Security also proposed a $103,000 fee on capped H-1B visa petitions. And then the economic news. This one's huge. Philadelphia Fed's manufacturing survey showed American factories having the strongest current conditions in more than 5 years. But more striking, the manufacturers, their expectations for the future surged to the highest level since the beginning of the Reagan boom in 1983, with the biggest one jump ever recorded. In other words, American manufacturing isn't surviving. It may be on the verge of a major... We're going to build things in America again, and nobody thought that was possible, with the exception of our guest. That's all in 1 week. One. And the man responsible is President Donald J. Trump.
So I didn't mean to like have to go into that, but you can hear kind of like that the extension from the intro in the background. So that's the audio. Now Glenn Beck's kind of coming on to the scene and doing what he generally does, is like kind of this full scope um, of what's going on, and this is a very unique deal, and so the timing does matter, right? I'm dating these because, right, 8/26/2026 is going to matter in the context of it. It's not just a live from 3 months ago. The generalized way in which YouTube essentially, like, underneath goes, hey, you know, you have content from a year ago, and it generalizes a year, even though it's like, let's say 13 months, 14 months, 15 months. It won't actually kick over to 2 years until 24 months, you know. So everything that happened 1 year ago is 1 to 2 years ago. And just like the generalization of so much content doesn't really script in and identify the singularity that actually exists as far as the details that's, I believe, are much more necessary than we kind of oftentimes give them credit for. So I'm curious to see like how President Trump comes into this conversation on that, right? The banter of everything that's happened within this 1 week. And it's one thing to say all the things, but let's also consider too that President Trump doesn't operate alone, like all the different things. It's more about the direction is more important than speed, is one of my favorite mantras. And it's like, if you're sitting in the president's seat and you're really kind of pointing towards a direction, it's not so much about how fast it got here, the 1 week speculation there, but it's more about like, this is how much like effort we have moving in this direction, is how I'm listening to a lot of that. But anyway, that's my insight.
Mr. President, welcome. Last night we found out that
it does sound a little exhausting as you're going over that list. I'm getting exhausted. I said, that's
I know.
A lot of work.
I don't know how you do it. I know.
Well,
last night we found out that Dolly Parton passed away, and you did something, and I actually wrote this in my diary last night before I heard what you did. I said, I feel like she's kind of, you know, like I feel about her the way I felt about Queen Elizabeth. She was just such class, and I felt.
So I'm not going to offshoot too much on that, but it's just like, it's kind of the nature of radio hosts to like go at the biggest news first, right? To get a comment from a person that you're exclusive with on the phone for that. Like, that's the biggest things in the news, and so it's kind of like a surface level thing, but it shouldn't be considered to be the most important aspect of this conversation, is what I'll say there.
Like we should lower our flags, and for the first time in history, you said we should lower our flags, and you declared that our flag should be at half staff. That's never been done before. Why'd you do it for her?
Is that was never done for an entertainer before? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Because
never.
We've done this, lowering, but as I understand it, I've heard that from a couple of people. I'm a little surprised, but she was unique. I mean, she was amazing, and to lose her, it's like you lose a member of the family. You know, we all knew her so well. I knew her a little bit. She wasn't a very political person. She really liked me, I will tell you, but she also wanted to stay very, She was of the opinion, the 50%, who needs to lose. I don't think it's 50. I think it's probably 20% of the fans, okay, not 50. But she was a great person, and she was just a nice person. I liked her a lot. And I thought it was a natural thing to lower the flags.
Can we put something to rest here? Because the speculation is crazy. The CIA director, ours, is in Russia. Rumors are saying Putin is going to test NATO resolve, all the way to speculation that is crazy. He's going to strike England, all the way to this is maybe the U.S. telling them about the Iranian sanctions, saying we're serious about them. Can you tell me why our CIA director flew in the middle of the night to meet with the Russians?
Well, none of the above. He's there on, very sort of semi-routine. I hate to disappoint people. We would like to see the war with Ukraine end. That's a war would have never started, Glenn, if I were president. That's one of the negatives of not having it done that way. I think this way has actually turned out to be bigger in many ways. But you wouldn't have had the war with Ukraine, and you wouldn't have had 25 million people coming into our country like they did, just come in like we were a bunch of fools. It was so sad. But they, 20, and I think the number's higher than 25, frankly. But they came in from prisons, and they were drug dealers, and they were murderers, and everything else, and they poured into our country. You wouldn't have had that. But you would not have had the war in Ukraine. John Ratcliffe is a fantastic guy. He's the head of the CIA, and he is not in there for any of the things that you said. Now, something may come out, out of it. We're working very hard to get that war ended. And frankly, they both want to see it ended at this point.
All right. So, obviously, just mostly talking points here. But I think it's sometimes that comes to mind with me, too, when I hear about the foreign wars and the foreign affairs, the things that aren't necessarily, like, right here happening is, I hesitate to, like, really bring these thoughts up, honestly. Like, it's something that just kind of, like, rumbles around the brain a lot of the time, but when they're talking about wars with Iran and Ukraine, and just the locations themselves, sometimes words, and nation words, they don't feel so familiar. I've seen, like, the smallest little breadcrumb become the biggest global, catastrophe overnight. COVID-19, right? And I'm, like, so speculative personally and skeptical that I never gave into it. And I think having some sort of mental fortitude around narratives and content is almost like it's like a superpower. It's to abstain from the insidious notions that are essentially just kind of like following in. So I'm not gonna, like, go down the rabbit hole too much longer here with the content there. It's there, it's uploaded. If you have thoughts on this, I'll probably need to listen to it at some point throughout the day. I don't want to be on here forever just talking up a storm to basically nobody, because there's really not any subscribers on here yet. But it's just to kind of, like, outline that thought process of where we're at. So, I'm just here hanging loose. Hang is a word, right? Hanging loose is like, so G, if you look at hang and you look at it backwards, like, this is the idiocy, right? You go into things and you just try on what fits and what doesn't fit. And then the hard part is just not letting your brain kind of spin out and kind of regulate your nervous system enough to be able to sit in some of these circumstances. But the word hang is not NG. And so, where does that G come from? I got a G on the back of my hat. Hat is indicative of hate, right? Hat, hate, never again hate anything. What are we looking at right on the screen? Book of Nahx, never again hate anything. And the reason that President Trump is essentially like a piece of the puzzle in a big way is there's certain individuals that would be able to see the symbology. As somebody who's been in the entertainment business and understands these types of relationships, again, and so you're looking at a red hat, right? And so if you really kind of organize red hat, the MAGA, a game, backwards, MAGA is a game, and it's kind of like playing with your head in order to kind of like get you to see the bigger picture. A game, hatred is the game. And who kind of helped instigate some of the things in the precursors? Well, essentially this guy. I put out a lot of content in 2018 and through 2019 that kind of led up to a lot of events that really, like, kind of just nailed me to my own cross, right? Nailed me to the wall and said, hey, this is what you wanted, this is what you asked for, and kind of like put me on blast, put myself on blast for that type of thinking. And so there we've landed. So I'm kind of hanging loosely on this precipice and on these thoughts, and hoping that at some point there's gonna be enough human beings that, like, are actually able to just come in here and speak candidly enough without being completely blocked down to the ground floor. So the allowance kind of gives me opportunity to kind of get this broadcast to a greater full. So I'm working on my thumbnails, I'm working on all the other things, the details of what it is, and I'm trying to avoid the copyright. But this is what the language really is, what this looks like when you make a call and put something out there right on the tail end of it, a conversation that I can listen to and hear. Because all those other things have been building blocks over the last 7 years-ish, since just before COVID-19, when I was already on the tail end of a massive project where I'm calling his attention and getting like a call to action around what I wanted Nahx to be and represent at that time, which again was never again hate anything. And so that narrative has kind of like blossomed into all these narratives and content. It just flies over my head a lot of the time. I can't even pay attention to everything that kind of comes my direction. But where does it start? It starts with like Title Town, right? It starts with the G, and you know, the little G to the big G, and just recognizing that if we're really looking at things from a spiritual context, there is a lot more to consider than just the physical of where we're at. The quantum field allows us to really dive into something much broader. And so if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please feel free to like find the next piece of content, point you in a direction. Start at the beginning, you know, Nahx Volume 1, where we talk about that deer being caught in the headlights that I mentioned here in this video today, or just pick up where we left off. But either way, peace be with you all.